Hello and welcome to the Deep End Podcast. I'm Joe Wiggins, and today we are going to do an interview with Tom Russell of Hollandspiele Games fame. He is a designer who has recently launched a new business venture into the board gaming world, and one that a lot of people, especially our audience who is more in tune with the heavier style games, is really paying attention to. I know that whenever they have something that's released, I'm always eager and excited to hear about it and see what's going on. But we have Tom Russell with us today. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing all right. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing fine. I've had a wonderful day of work, kind of winding down for the day. And now I'm going to talk about some board games with you. How does that sound?
That sounds great.
Awesome. Well, I just kind of want to ease into this and just kind of have a nice conversation. And, I love to talk about gamers. And see, that's, I think, one of the wonderful things about our hobby is it doesn't matter really what your, own personal things are, that when you come to the table and you're playing a game with people that love board games, you can just talk about board games for hours, and it just kind of like happens, and there's just kind of a natural thing that happens there. And so I just want to kind of get this conversation going by talking a little bit about board games. And so I have a couple of primer questions, if you will, to just kind of pick your brain and just kind of give the audience something to think about, kind of a little insight into your gaming mind. But the one question I do want to ask you is, can you tell me, what is the last game that you played that wasn't something that you were designing or working on for development? So it might have been a while, because I know that you have like 20 things and 20 different projects going on, but can you remember what the last game you played was that was not a Hollandspiele product?
That would be 13 Days, the Cube Missile Crisis game. I've been hearing good things about it, and I thought, well, I should give it a try. And,
that's the one that's like, it's like mini Twilight Struggle?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
How'd you enjoy it? Was it good?
Yeah, I mean, that play was just trying to figure out how it works so that I could then sit down with Mary and play the game with her. Because, so that was like a solo, how do these things work so I can explain them kind of deal. So I usually end up teaching games.
Right.
But I enjoyed it, and I think it's very clever. I like clever, and I like things that are kind of compact and shorter. Now, Mary and I have Twilight Struggle. We got Twilight Struggle a few years ago in the GMT sale, and for what we needed it to be, it was just a little bit longer than what we had time for, and a little more complicated than what we had the time for to play. Because at that time, we were both working full-time, not in games. So we had very limited window of time to play games in. So this hopefully will see the table more often, and I'll see if I can learn some stuff from it. Because anytime I play a game, even if it's a game that doesn't resonate with me so much, I'm probably going to learn something from it, even if it's just not to do that thing, or it might help me conceptualize why I don't like a certain thing.
Yeah, I know that you do the thing I do quite often, where I actually like to sit down and really just set up the game, learn it, kind of play through a couple of rounds by myself before, if it's a game that I want to bring to the table with my wife, because my wife is a pretty avid gamer, but she is much more ready to play a game if she doesn't have to go through a very long rules teach. And so definitely priming the pump in that way. I'm not sure if it's the same for you guys, but it's good. So your wife is one of your gaming partners.
Yep.
So do y'all get to play games pretty often now that Hollandspiele, is she like the first blunt of play testing that you have before it goes on to the rest of the world?
Sometimes it depends on the specific type of game. Like a game that's going to be more complicated, that's like a kind of heavier war game kind of thing, where it's be several hours. That's not really her cup of tea as much, but things that are can play in a shorter period of time, that are easier to teach, and that we have the table space for, that those will see the table. We haven't been able to play as much lately because we've been so busy with stuff for the business. because we put out about 2 games a month, and we have games with wood bits, and when the game has wood bits, then we have to sort and put them in baggies and then mail them to our printer. And when a game sells well, then we're spending a lot of time preparing that kind of stuff.
Yeah. That's it's funny how a lot of people they sit around and they dream about having a job in the industry, which I do and I love. But it is funny that sometimes they think that it's just sitting around and playing board games all day, and oftentimes it's not. I know I checked last year at Origins, I clocked in like right under 60 games for the convention. I played a ton of games last Origins, and I think this Origins I clocked in maybe 5, and like 3 of those plays was a 2-player trick-taking card game called Fox in the Forest that came out. So I basically got 2 games in Origins over the span, and I work in the industry, and so it's kind of funny how that can oftentimes flop and flip with people's expectation versus the reality of what it actually means. So very, very funny there. But yeah, so kind of going along, just kind of getting into your mind about what your gaming tastes are, I do have a question for you. Now, I know a lot of times people love this question, and a lot of times people hate this question.
Okay.
And I was actually having this argument the other day with some friends, but this is the way my mind automatically works. But I want to ask you, if you could pick right now one game that is, you would say, my favorite game. This is, if I could have my druthers, time was not a factor, number of players was not a factor, no factors at all. But if I had whatever wish I wanted and whatever circumstance I wanted, this would be the game I would choose to be my favorite game. What is your all-time favorite game?
That's certainly a question. That's a really tricky one because I like all different kinds of games, and I'm going to be in the mood for a different kind of game at a different time. Like, there are times when I want to play a train game or even an 18xx game. That's not going to be every day. And there are times when I want to play like a simple hex counter game, or want to play a game that I'm working on, and it's really going to vary depending on my mood. It's like having a favorite movie. Like, I could say my favorite movie is Barry Lyndon, or I could say my favorite movie is City Lights. Those are 2 very different movies that scratch 2 very different itches. So it's really, I can't really answer that question. I'm sorry. I wish I could. What's your answer to that?
Okay, so like I was saying, I was having this argument the other day because people were just kind of like going back and forth a little bit, just of a long Twitter thread. But my mind automatically ranks things. So when I play something, I automatically rank it against other things. I actually played 18 Dixie. That's kind of what spurred this conversation. Is I played 18 Dixie last Saturday, and I instantly was like, oh, I think I like it better than this 18X game, but it's definitely not as good as this 18X game. And I like how it does this better than this one. And like, I was doing that, and other people are like, why can't you just enjoy the game for the game? And I was like, well, that's the way my mind works. Is my mind likes to say and compare it and say, where would I place this and rank it amongst other things? Also, just because of the podcast, like I've gotten stopped at so many conventions and stuff like that, or just people just reach out to me on Twitter and like, give me your top 5 this, or what are your top 10 this? And so I try to be ready to have those answers at the same time, where I'm like, if I had to choose, I guess I would say this, this, and this. And though my taste might be a little bit different, but I would definitely say right now, and I'm going to steal a quote from my friend Jimmy Okalika, because he taught me my first 18xx game, and I definitely feel like I have the same taste as him. But he says this often: there's 1817, and then there are all other games. And I think that's right now where I'm at, is 1817. First of all, 18xx period is my favorite type of game, but 1817 is like the pin. Like, I've played it 4 times now, and I still like get going. I'm doing all right, but like in that mid game, I'm just lost in a fog of just no idea what to do, because the game space is so open and so different. And I would drop anything on the dime to play that game if I had my way. But yeah, but I can understand. But like, let's say like right now, if you could just walk out the door and play a game with your friends, what game are you itching? What game are you dying to get to the table now? What flavor of donut are you craving?
You know, I am waiting for the. This feels like a cheat of an answer because it's one of my games, but I am waiting for the proof components to come for 4X, our game coming out next month, and I'm really looking forward to getting the game on the table with people again with the components. We already got the proof of the cards; those were from a different printer. I even have them. I have them with me right now, but I'm still waiting for the board and rules and counters in the box and all that, and want to get that on the table and get a couple of good games in with that. Because we always, whenever we get a proof copy, so we've gone through the playtest and development, we've gone through everything, we get the proof, we then play that one more round of time before we release the game, just to make sure there's nothing that got missed. And sometimes, with war games being as complicated as they are, there will be one little thing that gets missed, which is always really irritating, always so frustrating. But I don't think that'll be the case with 4X though, because this thing's been in development for 6-7 years and been pretty stable the whole time. So,
well, I'm not gonna lie, and I'm not trying to butter you up or anything like that, but that is right now my most anticipated game. I mean, it's an economic game. It has trading and negotiation built into it. I am salivating at the thought of getting a copy of 4X into my hands. So I'm really excited about it. All right, well, let's move on from what kind of donuts we want to eat, but and move on to a little bit about kind of more of the historical aspect of your gaming career. And here's an interesting game, or an interesting question: is what? And now, when I say this, I know a lot of people, they played Monopoly with their family, but my question is, what was the first game you ever played that you felt was the game that was drawing you into the hobby? So like the first game that you played where you kind of realized like there are stuff beyond like what the store shelves, you know, at the local Walmart have. There is a broader world of board games. What is like the first game that you played that really kind of gave you that taste and that kind of desire to look more into this hobby?
Well, I have a literal answer and a figurative answer. So let me give you the figurative answer because, and this is a story I've told a few other times, how I discovered kind of modern board games is several different things kind of happened in parallel at the same time, kind of drawing my attention to the existence of the hobby. So I was in a store, it was a comic book shop, and in the basement of the shop, they had this huge version of this game called Settlers of Catan, and they had these games by this guy named Rainer Knizia, and then a couple days later, I'm hitting random article button on Wikipedia, and comes up something called 18XX, and there's a video from some guy named Scott Nicholson talking about 18XX. So I just kind of get interested in modern board games in general, but I don't know where to go to play them or get them. So we kind of do some research, and I buy a couple of Euro-type games. So the first one I ever actually got on the table was Carcassonne, and that was fun. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it more once we got a couple of the expansions in there. But you know, that kind of opened my eyes to the fact that there was this hobby. So kind of stumbling across it with all these things kind of pointing towards it at the same time in my life, and at a time when I was really receptive to that, where I was paying attention to that, I guess. So that happening, and then I tried Carcassonne. We tried a couple others. It was hard because we did not have a lot of money. We still don't have a lot of money, and it's really kind of a luxury hobby. It's still a luxury hobby, especially on the war game side. Yes. That's one reason why with Hollandspiele we try to have what we think are reasonable prices for our games. We could charge more and have a bigger profit margin so that we could then afford to do distribution. We figure it's better just to have a price that's more reasonable. But that's really how I got into it. And, eventually we found a game shop, started playing games there. And, I got introduced to all sorts of different kinds of games. Playing my first Winsome was really a treat.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of got me started thinking about working for Winsome, which has been very, worked out pretty well for me. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's awesome. Kind of that Carcassonne kind of like brought you in. That's awesome. Yeah. That's a much better game. My first game was Munchkin, so we're lucky I'm still here.
I think I actually had played Munchkin prior to that, but that was with some friends who happened to have it. It wasn't really where it clicked with me. Where like there are, because they were really kind of more into the Warhammer, Blood Bowl, D&D, kind of very fantasy kind of segment of the hobby, I guess. And
gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, is just kind of like right on the tails of that, do you remember if there was a game that you played where you really felt really kind of urged you into maybe thinking a little bit more along the lines of designing? Because I looked at your designer biography prior to this on BGG, and it's impressive. There are pages of games to scroll through if you go to Tom Russell's BGG profile that he designed. But I'm curious, was there a game that you played where you really started not necessarily thinking about it from the perspective of, I enjoyed this game to play it, but from a perspective of, I think I might want to design a game?
Really, that impulse was there right from the start before I even got Carcassonne in the mail when we ordered it, because I've always been kind of a creative person who wanted to do things and hopefully make some kind of living creatively. My wife and I made feature films. I've done writing. I did music, even though I'm tone deaf. I did all sorts of different things, and none of it stuck. And one of the things I was doing is I was making video games, computer games. Mm-hmm. I had no programming skills, so it was very much spending months trying to get things to work. Very simple things that someone else could do in 5 minutes would take me days and days and weeks. And I had a video game I wanted to do, which was turn-based. And the thing is, I figured by the time I was done programming the framework just to get started and start playtesting, to be 6 months later. I don't even know if the game itself works. So I thought maybe I can prototype this physically as a board game. And that kind of thing happened. That first prototype happened right when I started hearing about the modern board games. Mm-hmm. So I pretty much felt like designing games was something I could probably do and probably play to my strengths. The things that kind of were holding me back in other forms are more assets with board games. So really, I as soon as I heard about board games, like, oh, maybe I can do this. And then eventually I did. And my first few designs, they weren't great. And even the first few after that, because I didn't have a lot of knowledge of the hobby, a lot of breadth of knowledge, because I didn't have access to that many games, I was inventing mechanics that someone else already invented 2 years previously. So the game wasn't as innovative as I thought it was.
Right.
Because I really thought I was going to do Euro games, like medium weight Euro games was what I was aiming for. And I never could really get any of those to sell. I did get a publisher who was going to publish one of them, which was the game about the horse breeding, but that fell through. But I kind of fell into doing the war games and train games, so those are the ones that sold. Like I thought, I'm going to do Euro games, and I'll do this train game as a lark. I'll do a war game as a lark. And the Euro games never sold, but those two did. So that's where I am.
Out of necessity, almost. That's cool though. That's good that like messing around with those different designs kind of led you and kind of like opened up the different doors that were able to kind of lead you into different places. That's good. But that desire to design, I mean, it was there before the board games ever hit the table. That's definitely cool to hear. Sometimes it's a spark, and sometimes it's just always has been there. That's good. But speaking of which, the train games. So before Hollandspiele officially existed, you had done quite a few train games published through Winsome Games, which I'm sure people that are familiar with our podcast know. Winsome Games is kind of a pre-order system for a set of games that are all based upon rail themes, and you pre-order them and never know exactly what they're going to be, but just kind of hope that you're going to get on the list, get a copy. I know I got my first set of Winsomes this year, though I've played plenty of them in the past, and so it's kind of an unusual system to get the games. They're not very widely available unless they're picked up by another publisher, because only the people that order them and a couple lucky few that get them via the getting on the list for that year are the ones that have them. But can you tell us a little bit about kind of how you got involved with John and Winsome Games and just kind of started doing train games for him?
Well, so I was in a position where I hadn't had any games published yet, and I wanted to get games published, and I felt like I need to work with like a really good developer, because I'm still learning how to do this stuff. And I felt from the couple of Winsomes I had played at that point, which were really just the version that Queen or whoever had republished, I felt that their development was really sharp, and like I want to work with them. And I feel if I can work with them, get a game published through Winsome, that's going to help me as far as people becoming more aware of who I am as a designer, and I may be able to use that to spring forward and do more things. So I started working on a game which ended up being Northern Pacific, specifically because I want to do a game that Winsome will want to publish. So the impetus of it was I want to have some kind of business relationship with Winsome, so I'm going to do this game that I feel will be in their wheelhouse. And I sent an email to John Bohr, and he said, please send me the game. And I sent it to him, and I was a little bit nervous at first. But they played it and loved it, and they wanted to publish it. So that was great. And working with them, their development is really sharp. They really put the thing through the ringer and test it. And with Northern Pacific, first of all, they gave it that title because it was a different railroad previously. So they changed the geographical location, they changed the title, and they made the map about twice as big as what it was originally. So if you've played that game, it's a very quick game. Imagine with half as many spaces. That was my original design. And I learned a lot about how to make that kind of richer decision space with a few spaces through working with them on that. And the great thing about working with Winsome is that John Bohr came up to Michigan to meet with me and my wife, which no other publisher I know of is. And he said that every time he works with a new author, he comes and he meets with them, and he was just utterly charming. And so that really, and he had a lot of information about how the industry worked, and really helped orient me quite a bit as to how I was going to approach things going forward. And so that was the first one, and then I didn't know if I would do a second one or not, but then I had an idea for a second one when I was driving home from work that became Irish Gauge, and they wanted to do that one. And so since then, I've tried to do one for them every year. I did end up skipping a year between Trans-Siberian and this year's game, which is Iberian Gauge. Just stuff got... I didn't have as much time. It took me longer to develop it, I guess, and get it where I needed it to be for Iberian Gauge. And Absolutely. I have one I'm working on now for them, so hopefully that will show up next year or the year after.
Well, again, and not to definitely do not want to step on any toes here, but will you be publishing your train games through Winsome going forward?
Through Winsome,
is there a potential? Okay, so there's no potential of some of your train designs making it over to Hollandspiele now that you have your own publishing house?
I don't think we're going to do that with Hollandspiele. Now, I mean, never say never, but I'm very happy working with Winston. I'm very happy with the development that they give the games.
Right.
And I'm very happy with the possibility that the games might then be licensed to a larger publisher and have wider distribution, and I get more money. So I'm totally okay with that, and I enjoy just doing a train game a year for Winsome if I can, because doing a train game is very different than doing a war game or doing kind of a politics game or whatever other kind of game I'm doing or developing. So it's kind of a nice break from what I do normally.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, it looks like it makes sense for us to do something more along those lines some point in the future. But right now we kind of focus on what we would call war games and weird games. So, and the train games aren't quite weird enough yet to.
True, but they speak to that niche audience. But
they do.
I do want to actually that's kind of a perfect jumping point to get into the next kind of big segment that we're going to talk about, and that's going to be about Hollandspiele. How it got started and everything. Now, from what I've played. I believe 2 Hollandspiele titles at this point, and I'm eager to try more. I know that a lot of what is published through Hollandspiele is war games, and so I know I've spoken to you on Twitter a little bit, and we're gonna change my mind on war games officially. That's gonna come out. But you publish these very unique and very strange games sometimes that people would call them in the industry. It's not a lot of flash and flair. It's for people that kind of prefer this style of game. They know what they're going to get. And I can definitely kind of lump Hollandspiele a little bit more into the same category as you would some of these other very unique, very different publishers, much akin to a Sierra Madre Games, a Winsome Games, or a Splotter Games. I would kind of lump you in there in that category as you kind of
good company to be in.
Oh, no, that's what I'm saying. And those are the kind of games that really speak to people because, when Splotter has a new title or when Phil Eklund is having something that comes out, a lot of us, we don't think too hard about what it is and what the mechanics are. We sign up because we know we're gonna get in the box. And if anything, even if it's not our cup of tea, it's gonna be interesting and it's gonna be something that we find fascinating.
Okay.
So that's how I think about Hollandspiele and at least the company. So if you are watching this interview and you are new to Hollandspiele and you go to your website and you see a whole bunch of games that you've never heard about, I would definitely point you in the direction of, if you're wondering what type of place you're going to get into, I'm not saying they're exactly like that, but I am saying Hollandspiele would keep company with those types of publishers, at least in a game space. So can you go ahead and just tell us a little bit about how Hollandspiele came to be? What was the cause, the catalyst for it kind of breaking out and deciding? Because it's really only last year kind of became a real thing. I know that 2016, quite a few titles, and 2017, I mean, you guys are just pumping them out like crazy. But just kind of tell us a little bit about that early kind of pre-era where you were kind of looking at starting it and why it started.
Okay, so once I had decided, that I'm pretty okay at this game design stuff, I should try to make a go of it. I was aware very quickly that the chance of making any kind of living at it is slender as a designer. As a publisher, it would be more likely to have some kind of income. So Mary and I were looking at it as pretty much right from the start that we want to get into publishing eventually. The obstacle that I saw was I wanted to have some kind of reputation as a designer that I could kind of trade off of when starting my company or our company. And so I was trying to get the Euro games published because we thought we were going to design Euro games. And that's where that title, the name of the company comes from, Hollandspiele. It's Mary's maiden name, Holland, but also we thought it'd be funny if we had published Euro games and we had a company that sounded like it was from Europe. And It's still a little funny, but we ended up, not getting any of my Euro games published.
Right.
And I ended up getting into the war games. And we still wanted to publish, and we thought, well, we have this name. It's a good name. It's kind of it doesn't sound like a war game company name, but it doesn't not sound like one either. Whereas if we had a company name that was like really action-packed or violent or war-y, we could not then really do kind of gentler, weird games that don't have a war theme. It'd be kind of a stretch, I guess, if we had, Boom Boom Kerplow games and then it has something like Automati's et Populares.
Okay, but if you're not going to use that name, if I start a game company, can I use that?
Boom Boom Kerplow, yeah, sure.
Okay, all right. Boom Kapow Games. I'm gonna LLC that.
Okay, and so I started getting war games published, and I started working as an editor for a magazine, a war game magazine, where I was developing war games and editing articles and all that. And Mary was working for a small folio games publisher that did Ziploc war games. And we learned a lot about that practical business end of it. And when our time with those came to an end, we said, well, we have some experience now. We can try to make a go of it. And we decided to use the name Hollandspiele. And it took us, we kind of figured we were going to be launching in 2016, even by the end of 2015. We weren't sure when that was going to be, and it wasn't until August of 2016. By that time, we had the games for 2016 ready. 5 games released in 2016. Those were all ready before we even opened our doors because we wanted to have some kind of lead time. We figured we'd be releasing 1 game a month, and that at that schedule, 5 months lead time is a decent amount of lead time to keep other things in development, and would make some kind of small side income. Now, we ended up in early 2017, in January, releasing 2 games because the December game wasn't quite ready, so it got pushed back to January. Production-wise, it wasn't quite ready. Mm-hmm. And with those 2 games coming out, we looked at what we were making and figured, well, we might be able to make a go of this full time. And so since then, we try to release 5 games a quarter, so about 2 a month, give or take.
Okay.
And that is enough for us to be able to do it full time and keep a roof over our head and save and all sorts of other fun stuff. So
you're in a constant state of just games coming in, getting through the development process, and then getting ready to come out.
Yeah. And, some games take more development time than others. When I'm doing a game like we have this series, the Shields and Swords series. It's a medieval hex encounter battle game. Mm-hmm. So, I know that system like the back of my hand. The development of those games does not take a lot of time.
Right.
They still need to be researched. They still need to be designed and tested and developed and tweaked. But it's not as extensive as it is with something like This Guilty Land, the one I'm working on currently, which that's going to drag out for a little while.
Right.
So that helps us because we have certain series that we're doing games in. So that helps us develop those games a bit more quickly. And because we're doing it full time, because we really don't do anything else with our time 7 days a week. 2 of us were able to get quite a bit done. So
right. And so now let me ask you, so this a little peek behind the curtains, if you don't mind, mm-hmm. but what would you say is the how big is the catalog of games that Hollandspiele at any given time is working on? So that's just how many games are kind of like in some process of like almost ready. This is kind of getting mm-hmm. ready for next, quarter. Or, we have these and this is just an idea with some paper attached to it. How many would you say projects Hollandspiele at any one time has its fingers in developing?
Anywhere between 6 and 12, I think. Okay.
And now, not every game from Hollandspiele is from the mind of Tom Russell.
No, it's not. Thankfully, because I couldn't do it.
Can you speak a little bit about how some of these other designers? I know that what really alerted me and quite a few others onto Hollandspiele getting on their radar.
I'm going to guess Infamous Traffic.
Was an Infamous Traffic. I mean, I tease Cole a lot. Cole's a good guy. I like him a lot. And I tease Cole all the time, and I say that he's heavy gaming's golden boy right now. And he shouldn't do anything to screw that up, because he's kind of got this reputation at this point for, if Cole's doing something, I'm excited, you know? And, you know, Infamous Traffic was a follow-up to PAX Premier. It did not go through Sierra Madre Games and went through Hollandspiele. And so a lot of people were very excited about, you know, what that was, what it was going to be. They were getting very eager about it. It had such a dark, morbid kind of theme to it. Very interesting, very different kind of a game, which we're used to coming from Cole at this point. But my question to you is, you know, not just Cole, but maybe a little bit specifically, but then how did all of these other peoples kind of find themselves looking to Hollandspiele as the publisher that's going to put out the games that they're working on?
So some people just approach us, you know, and they'll tell us what the game's about. We'll take a look at the rules. We'll see if it's something that's a fit for us and what we're looking for in a game, and if we like the game. And so, I mean, we've had designers who just have approached us. John Tyson, we've done a couple of his operational American Civil War games. We have a couple more games coming from him next year. He just approached us. There are some where we approached them, either because we'd worked with them before. We had both worked with designer Brian Train previously, and we wanted to work with him on Hollandspiele. So there's that. And then with designers are just people that we just want to work with, period, even if it's just, you know, for the first time. We might have an idea for a game. Like, we want to do a game on Operation Unthinkable, which was Churchill's plan to attack Stalin at the end of World War II. And so we wrote to designer Ty Bomba, who's done a lot of what-if games, and said, hey, we'd like to work with you. We'd like to work with you on this project if it interests you. And he's like, yeah, I want to do that. So we kind of, you know, commissioned that more or less. With Cole, so I was working with Cole. I was editing an article he wrote about games on the American Civil War. And I mentioned that we had a company and that we're trying to get off the ground, and we'd love to publish one of his games. And he came up with Traffic, and we said, this is great. We'll publish it. We love it, you know. Yeah. And that was pretty much it. So it's really just wanting to work. Sometimes we want to work on a game on a particular topic, and I can't design it, so I try to find someone who can. Sometimes I just want to work. We just want to work with someone because we like their work and like to get it out there. So, and it's been great. Traffic has been. I mean, it's our best selling game.
Yeah,
and it's the game that put us on the map for the non-war gamer segment of the hobby, because a lot of people bought Traffic, but not the same people who buy the war games. A lot of the war gamers don't even look at Traffic, but there's still this nice segment of the hobby who, you know, wants to get Traffic on the table and wants to buy it. And that's been good, and it's been bad. It's been mostly good. I mean, it's been very successful for us, and you know, critically and commercially. But people who are not familiar with war game companies and with like paper maps and so forth, they get Traffic, and they get very upset that it doesn't have a mounted board. Right. We had someone open a PayPal dispute saying it wasn't as described. It was exactly as described. I mean, we gave you the game. I don't know.
Right.
So
there, and honestly, sometimes
I'm dreading 4X. I'm dreading releasing 4X for this reason, because there are going to be people who are going to buy it, and they're going to freak out. And I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, and it's one of those things. I mean, when you're designing inside of a, not just in a particular framework, but
Mhm.
also in a particular price point as well,
Mhm.
which is very key to, I think, what Hollandspiel wants to do, judging by some of your earlier thoughts that you had voiced.
Mhm.
People that like me, that I buy the Winsomes, I buy Clinic from Albin Viard, which is a handmade copy of a game. And, those early Splotter games and stuff like that, those early Phil Eklund games where they're like, yeah, it needs a board, but here's a bunch of cards that you can lay out on the table that kind of make a board.
Mhm.
Like, oh, like you get not necessarily used to it, I don't know, but those kind of things come along with designing inside of a specific framework
Mhm.
to make that game work.
Oh yeah, exactly. I mean, if we were to do our approximation of a mounted board for traffic, then the cost of the game goes up $25.
Mhm.
And I can see people paying $50 for traffic for the experience it gives you. I don't know if a $70 or $80 version of traffic is going to do all that well.
Right.
You know.
And that's kind of harkening back to those early days of companies like Splotter
Hmm.
and, Winsome and everything. They're not producing thousands and, 5,000 copies of a game, because if you produce 5,000 copies of a game, how long are you going to have those 4,500 copies?
Exactly, exactly. Because the way we do it with our print on demand method, it enables us to take chances on stuff,
Mhm.
because there's no guarantee that something like 4X is going to sell. Now, there's a lot of interest in it, so I'm really excited about that. But there's no guarantee that that's going to sell more than 20 copies. And we can do a game that only sells 20 copies and still keep our house.
Right.
Now, luckily, our games sell more than 20 copies, but we're not selling thousands and thousands of copies, and we don't pay for a copy until someone buys it. So, I mean, it works out for us. It lets us take chances on kind of weird topics and uncommercial topics. Excuse
Mhm.
me. I couldn't find anyone to publish supply lines until
Right.
we did it.
I mean, but it has such a just eye-catching name. I mean,
Yeah.
when you hear the supply lines of the American
American Revolution.
Revolution,
The
uh,
Northern Theater, 7075, 7077. Yeah.
and I can't even pronounce the other one I have. Optimates es populares. I
Yeah.
mean, they're such breathtaking. No, but that's because what your audience is geared towards and is in tuned with.
Mhm.
And with that being said, Hollandspiel, in the 2 years that it's been out, has probably had, for what you guys are and are doing, just a record-breaking amount of releases. Like it is a breakneck
Yeah.
pace at which you guys are producing those games. And you guys have motivation. It's like you said, it's you need to do 5 games a quarter to keep it all the mouths fed and everything like that. And so you're constantly working through these rotation of games to have the next ones that are coming out. And people are taking notice. They're interested. They're very curious about what Hollandspiel is doing. But let me ask you, this is kind of around going into your second full year of
Mhm.
publishing and getting everything understood, and you're going to Essen, I believe, for the first time this year. Is that correct?
No, I don't even have a passport.
Oh,
No, I'm
okay.
not going to Essen. I know
4X will be in Essen. Is that right?
not. I mean, I know that there is someone who is going to be muling games over for certain people, and might include 4X depending on the schedule. But no, everyone seems to
Okay.
think that everything we do, like when Traffic came out, everyone was like, "It's coming out at Essen." Like, I never said that. Nowhere does it say that. I don't know. They just assume it's going to be at Essen.
Well,
Um,
I'm actually so I'm guilty as well. I had seen 4X originally on the Essen preview list,
yeah.
which is where I think a lot of people are getting that misconception. That's actually where I got that misconception from, it being on that Essen, preview on the Board Game Geek. But so with 4X upcoming and a lot of kind of hype writing behind that one, let me ask you, what do you see for Hollandspiele going forward into the future?
Well, so I mean, we kind of are pretty good at what we're doing. So a lot of it is continuing to do what we're doing while trying to be a little more ambitious coming into this next year. So we have more war games coming out. We have some solitaire war games coming out, which people seem to be excited about. And we have some weird games that we have in the works that are coming out. And we're trying to do stuff that is even a little bit weirder, because we really became aware of the fact that there is a market for weird, which when I first designed 4X back in, 2011, 2010, whenever it was, there was not, to my conception, the same market for weird games. I tried to sell that game to anyone who would listen and some who wouldn't, and no one wanted it. I even went to one of those little 18xx specialty publishers,
right,
and said, "Hey, it's not an 18xx, but it's pretty nerdy and opaque." And like, no, that's too nerdy. so whereas now people are excited about it in a way that I don't think they would have been 5-6 years ago. So we'd definitely like to produce stuff that's more ambitious and stranger. One of the big things I'm working on is this game, This Guilty Land, which is about the legislative battle over slavery in America in the 4 or 5 decades prior to the Civil War breaking out. And I would not have touched that with a 10-foot pole a year ago.
Right.
I wouldn't have had the confidence to do that. But I feel like, you got to keep stepping up a little bit. So that's one of the things on the docket there. And so that, I think, is going to be, I hope everything we do is going to be a big release. I know everything we do sells lots and lots of copies, but realistically, I know a Shields and Swords game isn't going to light the world on fire.
Right.
People who are going to play it are going to like it. It has a following, but it's not going to be a game that takes off the way Traffic did, the way Supply Lines has, the way Table Battles has just recently. Because we released Table Battles about a week ago, and we sold every copy on the first day.
Wow.
Had to get more copies. We're almost out again, so we have to get more stuff.
That's a good problem to have, though.
That's an excellent problem to have. Yes, it's the best problem to have. And we're going to have some expansions for that come out in this next year. Because one thing we haven't really done with our games is had any kind of expansions, and people like expansions.
Yeah.
So the thing with Table Battles is built in some ways to be expandable. Mm-hmm. So in a way that's very cost effective, because the expansion is just another deck of cards.
Right.
You don't need another box, don't need more wood bits, just need another deck of cards that's easy to ship, easy to pack into something.
Yep.
So so that's kind of our thing. We're still aiming for, to have about 20 games come out next year.
Well, speaking of which, so kind of leading into that, we talked a little bit. You kind of gave us a good overview of This Guilty Land, and kind of it's going to be a much bigger game for Hollandspiele, or at least in scope, if not table presence, so to speak. But could you, just for the people out there that maybe are new to Hollandspiele, new to what you guys are putting out, could you maybe speak a little bit more to this 4X? I know that's kind of the next one that's going to hit the table. And if people don't know about it, just kind of prime that pump and tell them a little bit more about what it has to do with.
So 4X is a game about trading currencies on the foreign exchange. The game has 7 different currencies in it, and each one only has value relative to the other currencies existing in 21 currency pairs. if that sounds appealing to you, then this is the game for you. If it doesn't, maybe it's not. It's really nerdy, opaque. It's almost like a butterfly effect machine. It's because everything you do will very subtly touch everything else.
Okay.
And the game can be very mean, but almost always, unless you're really good at it, you're being mean by accident.
Okay.
And everything is kind of very indirect. So it's just a game where you are investing in world economies to increase the value of a currency. And by increasing that value, you weaken the other currencies relative to it. So there's no fixed value for anything. Everything is fungible. And the way you're basically trying to make money is through these long-term contracts that you make with the bank. So if the exchange rate is 1 USD equals 2 JPY, you can make a contract with the bank to put in 5 USD and get 10 JPY out of it. And you fix that rate when you make that contract. But the contract's not resolved until some turns down the road. And during that time, the relationship between those two can fluctuate, where maybe the USD is going to be worth 3 JPY, or the 1 USD is worth 1 JPY. You're still going to resolve the contract at the original agreed upon rate. But now you have more or less money depending on how that relationship is altered through the actions you have taken, the other players have taken over the course of the game. And even actions that don't necessarily affect that currency will affect that currency, because the other currencies, because it's not just I want to get the most JPY. You want to have the most of a currency that is going to be the strongest currency at the end of the game. And at the end of the game, everything you have, all 7 types of monies, is all converted to that one strongest currency. So you want favorable exchange rates for that currency.
Okay. See, if that doesn't get you excited, folks, that are listening to this, I mean, I don't know what to tell you, because that sounds like a game you can really sink your teeth into and get done playing and still not know what you did. I think that might be a game that you win and you're like, I guess, that happened to me in Infamous Traffic. I won, but I guess I'll figure out how I won if I do it again next time.
Yeah.
But that's exciting.
What we actually did on the back of the box, the back of the description on the game, the back of the box, is actually a letter that Mary and I wrote to the customer that starts with, "Why did you buy this game?" And that's kind of, I mean, that's kind of how we're trying to market it. Is this is a game for people who are super nerds. You're a super nerd. This is your game. This game sounds so boring. It's great. Trust me. And because I don't know, you can't really make it sexy. You can't really make the game
you can't
exciting.
Just dwarves and elves into that and expect it to work.
No. And when I was working on the design originally, I had no idea why I was designing it. I was like, I'm never going to be able to sell this. No one's going to want this. And so maybe I can retheme it and make it like about space or some fantasy world with like gold and fairy dust or whatever that you're trading. And I couldn't get it to work. I wasn't enjoying it unless it was like as dry as possible. So
very, very interesting.
Yeah.
There's another game on the horizon that I do want to ask you about. One of my friends is a big war gamer down here. And he is very excited and asked me specifically to ask you about the game Blitzkrieg that's coming out.
Blitzkrieg, yes. That's coming out next month, end of October. That is the designer is Scott Muldoon and his son Miles, who was 5 years old at the time, and it was designed as a game the two of them could play together. So it is a war game that a war gamer can play with a kid. but still play with another adult and enjoy. So it still has some nuance and complexity to it, but it's meant to facilitate playing with a kid or with an adult.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. So kind of get your kids into wargaming early.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Yeah. Very, very cool. Well, are there any maybe secret projects that maybe I can poke you for and try to get a little information out that we might expect from Hollandspiele coming up? Any kind of like secret things that you're working on that you'd like to kind of maybe just share a little bit about, a little peek behind the curtain?
Well, I'm working. I was working this morning, in fact, on for the development for the first expansion for Table Battles. Mm-hmm. That is the War of the Roses. So it's going to be battles from the War of the Roses. So I'm announcing it here. This is
well.
All right, there you go. I have a bunch of things I'm working on. There's a sequel to Supply Lines that's going to be coming out.
Right.
I have a couple other solo games I'm working on. I have solo games I'm developing that other people are designing. I have we have a certain designer who is working on a couple of things for us, but I'm not supposed to talk about it yet. So I'm not going to say what those things are or who the designer is. Cool.
Okay. All right.
And let's see. I mean, we have so many pans in the fire at a time, and right. We generally only, unless I'm designing it, we don't announce things unless and until we're actually sure we're going to do it, and we usually have a cover to show off.
Yeah,
the cover might change by the end of it, but we usually try to have a cover before we go there.
Well, let me ask you, as far as your own designs, do you have anything over at Winsome that we should be expecting to see in the upcoming time?
I have a game that I am developing, which I hope Winsome will want to publish, which is a train game. Stop me if you've heard this one before. You have train companies and you have stock in those companies.
Okay, very unique so far.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing about it is that this is a game in which each player fully owns a railroad, in that if you are the red player, then you own the red railroad. I'm the blue player, I own the blue railroad. But the other players buy stocks in those railroads. I can't buy stock in my own railroad. Mm-hmm. Only buy it in your railroad. So it's not going to be a case where you just buy all of one color of stock,
right,
to lock people out, because you are in charge of that company. And you have to try to run that company well. But the better you run the company, which will pay off to you dividend-wise, because you're getting half the dividends yourself, the other players that own stock in your company are also getting money from it. And so that's one I'm very excited about, and we're putting it through its final testing here before I submit it to John. Hopefully he'll be like, yeah, this is great, I'll publish it. Maybe he'll say, no, I don't want to publish this, in which case I don't know what I'll do with it, but that's...
Might be Hollandspiele's first rail game.
Yeah, I don't know, maybe.
But man, that's exciting. I mean, when you get 5 games coming out a quarter, 20 a year, there's always upcoming releases to talk about. But I know that there are a lot of people excited about what's coming out. Blitzkrieg, 4X, This Guilty Land, some expansions to Supply Lines, an expansion to Table Battles, who my friend Andy Dennison over at Good Board and Ugly has really been talking positively about. He picked that one up and has really been enjoying it. And so there's a lot of exciting stuff going on over there. But I mean, as we kind of wrap this thing up, is there anything just to the people that would listen to this and are probably going to be hearing this podcast in the upcoming weeks that you would like to just tell them about Hollandspiele? Any kind of thing that you would like to maybe just let them know as far as, what they can do to get these games, where they can find them, what to expect, just any kind of parting information that you would like to leave with anybody hearing this?
Well, All of our games are available at www.hollandspiele.com, and that is the only place you're going to get physical copies of our games. We do offer P&P editions of our games through Board Game Vault for people who don't want to pay the shipping to get it from here to the other side of the ocean. But generally, if you want a physical copy of our game, you're not going to find it in stores. You're not going to find it on Amazon. You would have to buy it through our website. We produce games. Try to do 2 a month, about 5 a quarter, because it varies. Our games have paper maps. Our games, they have very thick 3x board counters.
Mm-hmm. They come with notes that berate you for buying them.
Well, for the one game, yeah. I don't say berate. Just it's. I'm really proud of that letter. We'll say that. I think this will be a core piece of trying to market the game. That and I just keep quoting this. The 18XX company telling me it was too nerdy for 18XX. I mean that's a gold mine.
That's something right to hang the hat on right there.
Yeah, exactly. We've really been very lucky and blessed that people have been reacting very positively to our stuff. Now, I think the stuff is good. That's why it has that reaction. But there's stuff that's good that doesn't catch people's attention, that doesn't take off. Mm. And I do feel like our stuff has been taking off in a way, especially lately, that's very gratifying and surprising.
Absolutely.
We always try to improve, and we always try to give people what we hope they will want. So with Hollandspiele, I mean, you can expect there are some games that are just straight up war games. There are some games that are weird. Someone on the Reddit, I was on the Reddit the other day. I don't use the Reddit, but I was on it, and someone said something along the lines of their experience with Hollandspiele is that they deliver on the weird, and that was a very nice thing. Whoever said that, and that's what we try to do. We try to provide really unique experiences, and we try to provide really good experiences, and hope people respond to them.
Absolutely.
That's it.
And if I can leave the people that listen to the Deep End podcast or have found this by wanting to hear more about Hollandspiele, the one thing I would say is definitely seek these people out to try some of their games. Some of the ones that that I have experience with firsthand, really speak to what this company is all about. I really think that kind of dipping your toes into Hollandspiele might give you the experience that you've been looking for that a lot of other game companies don't deliver on. Hollandspiele is doing unique and interesting stuff in that game space, in a game space that speaks to a lot of heavy gamers and gamers that appreciate things that are a little bit different and not always the same old Euro that's coming out. Very unique and individual games. And so I would highly recommend going to their catalog, looking through it, picking up some of the games that you might be interested in. I know Tom is extremely active on social media. I actually reached out to him because, me not being a big war gamer, I asked for some guidance in some of his titles that weren't particularly war games, and he led me to a couple of games that I have greatly enjoyed. And I definitely recommend that you try some of these things. I mean, they're not very expensive. You can pick up 2 or 3 of them, possibly even 4 of them for the price that you might pay for one big box Euro game. And so I would definitely recommend, reaching out and doing some of that testing of these games to see if this is for you. It's an acquired taste, but it's one of those that you might experience a new flavor of donut that might be your favorite from now on. It might be your go-to order when you go to Krispy Kreme, but definitely excited about what Hollandspiele comes down. Would you like to plug anything else about the company or about maybe the podcast that you do before we go?
Well, we do a podcast, the Mary and Tom Show. It's about a weekly podcast. It's a short one. So 10, 15 minutes, just telling you what we're working on and what kind of mischief I'm getting into and Mary's getting me out of So that's it's on the SoundCloud. I think it has an RSS feed for Apple devices. I'm not really tech savvy.
I have it on my iPhone on
Okay.
iTunes, so you can get it through there. So
okay, yeah. And we have games coming out. Like we have, I don't know, 5 more games coming out this year, which is Objective Shreveport, which is a ACW game, American Civil War, Hex Encounter War game. We have 4X, which we've talked about. We have Bitskrieg, which is good to play with kids. We have one called Charlemagne, Master of Europe, which is a solo game. And we have a new horse and musket game. And that's kind of it for the rest of this year. And then we have more stuff next year. Every month we have stuff, so pick them up, buy them, buy all our games. I don't mind. Or just buy the ones that resonate with you. If you're not a war gamer, then I definitely would say Traffic is a good buy. Automati's at Popularis isn't really a war game. It's a weird one though.
Mm-hmm.
But then and then Supply Lines might be a good hybrid one, and right. 4X will be coming out. So we have some non-war games. We're getting more of a catalog there, I guess. But that's what I'd say. And you always can ask us if you're interested in a certain. If you don't know what you want to look at that we have, I'll be happy to help point stuff out. I spend more time probably online saying you shouldn't buy this one than some people they should buy. I keep convincing people not to buy Infamous Traffic. They still do it, so I'm not complaining. But Infamous Traffic, if you don't like mean games, if you don't like weird and opaque games, if you don't like multiplayer games, that one's not for you.
Absolutely. But yeah, very excited about it, man. It's good to see somebody that's out there doing the unique things that those of us that enjoy that aspect of the hobby want to see. But yeah, that kind of wraps it up, I think. And, thank you guys so much for listening. Tom, thank you so much for doing this interview. I really appreciate a chance to get to know you a little bit better, get a chance to get inside the mind of Hollandspiele and see kind of what's making it tick and kind of what's on the agenda and what the plans for the future are. Definitely excited. And if you are looking for a company that delivers on the weird, check out Hollandspiele. Bye, everybody.